Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we discuss the truth of Lorgar. Was he a scorned son, or a calculating, betraying mastermind? General spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from across the Warhammer 40k universe. In particular, the Horus Heresy Primarch Series novel, Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, by author Gav Thorpe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now, the Primarch series of novels is an interesting combination. Some have provided real in-depth understanding of a Primarch, others an interesting bit of insight into their past, while others just more a spotlight of the Great Crusade years. However, one or two, such as Alfarius, head of the Hydra, have provoked and spawned larger, wide-spanning theories. And Lorgar, Bearer of the Word, is most definitely one of those few. And this largely comes from the final small chapter, as Corferon reflects on the galaxy. Set in the aftermath of the Monarchia chastisement and the Legion's secret turn to chaos, the Legion is burning all its books and parchments on the Emperor's divinity in bonfires, under the watchful eye of the Emperor's custodies, very much following the Emperor's decree to stop the worship and adopt the Imperial truth. However, beneath, taking one step further to Corferon's ultimate desire, the worship of the ruinous powers, already having seeded his corrupted chaplains and captains across the Legion. And from Corferon's thoughts here, there's been theories arisen of Lorgar planning the heresy the entire time, being secretly allied to the gods from the very scattering, to him simply manipulating and using Corferon from the beginning. So what is it? Is Lorgar the scorned son, or the secret mastermind? Well, before we begin, as I always say, there are no right or wrong answers, just how you feel about it and how you interpret the lore. It's one of the great things about talking lore and having these conversations. There's always so many different opinions. So, as I always say, drop your own thoughts in the comments below. Now, it begins with Corferon reflecting on the compliance of the world they are on. How, in it being one of the first they conquered, it's only appropriate their loyalty should end there too. Although, as I stated, it's very much hidden at this point beneath the surface, still with much of the Legion loyal to the Imperium. Corferon remembers the unbridled joy of Lorgar at the arrival of the Emperor and Magnus, the enthusiasm he began the Legion's Great Crusade. He reflects on how he's already begun his attempts to turn the Legion's worship to chaos, and then he admits how he'd always known it would come to this, how the powers had always acted through him, and they had led him to find Lorgar. Now, these thoughts of Corferon are absolutely no surprise whatsoever. He was always devoted to the powers, never embracing loyalty to the Emperor, hiding his true feelings and schemes as he always did. As we discussed at the start of the week back on Monday, Corferon even attempted to undermine Lorgar's attempts to unify cultists in the faith of the One, secretly releasing those loyal to the powers to keep the old faith alive across the world in hidden cults. Corferon was never motivated by Lorgar's calls of the One. He was motivated by the power. By Lorgar's side, he was unopposed, and he would secretly see the will of the powers done. And in talking of the will of the powers, we're not talking of Khor Phaeron actually communing with the Chaos Gods, merely being the devoted preacher he always was, believing everything that transpired, the will of the powers. No different than him claiming the powers acted through him. Virtually every time Khor Phaeron had to explain anything throughout Lorgar's life on Colchis, or any time as a matter of fact, it's the will of the powers, or the powers acting through him. Now of course his devotion is real, but it's also completely tied to his own desire for power. The perfect example is him going along with Lorgar's crusade of the One, despite secretly retaining loyalty to the powers. It simply meant Lorgar would wipe out Phaeron's enemies in the Old Covenant, leaving Khor Phaeron in a position to manipulate things the way he wanted. But I digress. Khor Phaeron shares a smile with Erebus over the flames of the bonfire, both happy they are one step closer to their ultimate goal. And then he looks to his Primarch Lorgar, who is staring up into the night sky and the Empyrean beyond. And here, Khor Phaeron suddenly has a bit of doubt, wondering if, rather than him being guided by the powers to Lorgar that fateful day, was it possible they had guided Lorgar to him instead? He had assumed that his zeal had been rewarded, the delivery of Lorgar the means by which Khor Phaeron would bring about their pre-eminence. It seemed prideful, now that he considered it. Yet it had been his hand that had steered events. It had been the endeavours and the machinations of Khor Phaeron that had delivered Lorgar to Varadesh, the heart of the Covenant, where he almost certainly would have ended up by any other route. Such was the nature of the Covenant, it was inevitable that Lorgar would have joined their ranks. For me, this is simply that part of Khor Phaeron realising how pitiful he truly is next to a Primarch, a man so utterly convinced in himself for his entire life that he is the most important. Unadulterated selfishness. And yet having to stand there and realise, on the cusp of his legion truly embracing chaos, of Lorgar abandoning the Emperor for good. It's Lorgar who can look into the warp, not him. It's Lorgar who matters, not him. That Lorgar would have conquered Colchis whether Khor Phaeron had found him or not, just as all the other Primarchs had their worlds. And that's just reality. That's simple facts getting through Khor Phaeron's unsurpassed arrogance, his notions of self-importance. It dawns on him that, actually, all those days, months and years in the desert actually just delayed Lorgar's inevitable rise to power. And again, that's simply the truth. And as much as Khor Phaeron attempts to rationalise his own importance again within his mind, he realises that, if he stepped aside, there's an entire legion of people waiting to take his place, that he's actually despised. Khor Phaeron thought of the beatings he had given him as a youth. At any moment he might have employed the voice, could have commanded Khor Phaeron to stop, to obey his merest whim. But he had not. Why? Why had he put up with the humiliation, the physical pain, the disdain of his adoptive father? The surest disguise for his own ambition had been to hide it within the cloak of another's. All that had occurred, from the moment he had stepped from the tent in the great expanse of Colchis' deserts, Lorgar had desired. Perhaps not desired, but allowed. He had allowed Khor Phaeron to take him from the declined. He had allowed the chastisement. even speaking and fighting on behalf of his abuser. And now that he had finally cast off the illusory faith in the Emperor and redirected himself to the powers, what now? Did he need Corpheron? The answer you're looking for here, Corpheron, is no. However, that does not mean Corpheron hasn't had an influence. In fact, he absolutely, beyond any shadow of a doubt, has. Just as all the Primarchs were shaped and moulded by those who found them, the worlds they were raised on. Now, these last reflections of Corpheron have largely been the reason for the theories regarding Lorgar being dedicated to the powers the whole time, planning the heresy from the beginning, and even using Corpheron the whole time. And for me, I took absolutely none of that out of those thoughts. Again, all I see here is Corpheron realizing how useless he is next to Lorgar, how the Primarch before him doesn't truly need him. And again, he's right. However, let's take Corpheron's question, why? Why had he put up with the humiliation, the physical pain, the disdain of his adoptive father? Now, you could feel the answer is the young Primarch put up with it to further his own ambitions. Or you could actually see Lorgar for the child he was. Go back and reread those early chapters. Listen to our conversation on Monday. Sure, Lorgar, even as a child, may have had the strength stronger than a normal human. However, the key here is he was just a child. Naive, trusting. Lorgar didn't view Corpheron as his father out of ambition. He viewed him as his father because he was the only father figure he had. Lorgar said it best himself. Corpheron promised, I will learn the truth. I think that will means I will learn what it is I am. I am not a child of humans. I saw the infants of the declined, and they are not like me. Lorgar was lost, seeking a place to belong, to understand what he is. It's a story we saw replicated across the galaxy with each one of his brothers. Why did he put up with the punishments? Because he was a child. He didn't know any better. Each time it was done as a lesson. Lorgar, as any human, was learning. It's actually as human as a tale as you can get. The moment Lorgar returns from killing the escaped rebels, it's like a rite of passage, a coming of age. Just by the look in Lorgar's eyes, Corpheron knew the time had come. The point had been reached, that Lorgar wouldn't put up with it anymore. For me, the most confirming of scenes where Lorgar as a child crying after one such punishment tells his fellow slave Nairo it doesn't hurt him physically, but in his heart, emotionally. And you have to remember something Corpheron never saw. Technically, as a Primarch, physically speaking, yes, Lorgar allowed his cruel upbringing, but that's no different than saying Russ allowed the wolves to raise him, the lion allowed Luther to take him in. It's simple human nature. And as for the line, the surest disguise for his own ambition had been to hide it within the cloak of another, that is all Corpheron has ever done. That's exactly what he has done with Lorgar, using him the entire time to further his own goals, his own power. That's Corpheron applying his own scheming, manipulative way of thinking to Lorgar. That line is the perfect description of everything Corpheron has ever done. It's his logic, not Lorgar's. Again, summed up by that following passage. All that had occurred from the moment he had stepped from the tent in the great expanse of Colchis' deserts, Lorgar had desired. Perhaps not desired, but allowed. He had allowed Corferon to take him from the declined. He had allowed the chastisement, even speaking and fighting on behalf of his abuser. Even here, over a century later, Corferon is completely unable to comprehend simple emotion, simple empathy, love. He can't even rationalize it in his head for a second, that Lorgar wasn't allowing something out of manipulation, because it's all he's ever done. It's consumed him. And now that he had cast off that illusory faith in the Emperor and rededicated himself to the powers, that's not saying Lorgar was not loyal to the Emperor. That's Corferon's view. It was an illusory faith, because he never embraced it. He never left the worship of the powers. Just go back and reread the scene of Monarchia to see how real Lorgar's pain was there. How truly the Emperor hurt him. The primal scream of emotion he roars into the sky. Lorgar truly loved the Emperor, his true father. He truly worshipped him. And it was the Emperor's fault that Lorgar fell to the embrace of the powers. Lorgar was no mastermind. He was a scorned son, seeking the acceptance he always had. But as for Corferon, he'd end his thoughts here wondering how or when he too would no longer be needed by Lorgar. As understanding here as he was the first time Lorgar tentatively called him his father. Because he's right when he realizes he's completely replaceable, but he's a fool for not understanding why Lorgar never has cast him aside. Summed up entirely by that one word: father. But as always everyone, what do you think? Do you feel Lorgar used Corferon? Do you feel Lorgar planned the heresy the entire time? Or like me, do you see Corferon's faults as the perfect reflection of the man he'd become, the way he'd lived his life? As I said, for me, having read Lorgar Bearer of the Word a couple of times now, I really don't see anything else, and actually think Lorgar's story is a really human one. His harsh upbringing by Corferon, the pain inflicted by the Emperor at Monarchia, and even the gods remaining with Horus for Warmaster. But as always everyone, agree, disagree, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers. Your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.